Okay guys, tonight your homework is to go through the notes with me. Okay, so first we're going to talk about finding distance. To find the distance between 2 points, there are 2 ways we're going to use. First we're going to do the Pythagorean theorem. So in order to use the Pythagorean theorem, we need to create a triangle. So I am going to create a triangle with the segment on there, and then I need to find the lengths of the 2 sides. So I'm going to count the squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this side is 5. And then I'm going to count the squares on this side. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this side is 4. So I have 2 sides of my right triangle, the 2 sides that create my right angle. I'm going to use those and put them in my Pythagorean theorem, my a squared plus b squared equals c squared, to figure out my 3rd side. This over here is my c. Okay? It doesn't matter which you put in for a and b, just that both of these have to go in for a and b. It doesn't matter which is which. So I'm going to say, well, I'm going to rewrite it. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. And I'm going to put the 5 in for a. So I'm going to say 5 squared plus 4 squared equals c squared. Okay? Then you do the math. 5 squared is 25 plus 4 squared is 16. And that's going to equal c squared. Okay? 25 and 16, you have to add those 2 together. When I add them together, I get 41 equals c squared. And then to figure out c, draw an arrow over here, you have to take the square root of both sides. Okay? So then you just have to figure out what the square root of 41 would be to find the length of your side. Okay? It's going to be 6 point something. I know that the square root of 36 is 6, and I know that the square root of 49 is 7. So it's going to be in between 6 and 7. So, and when you have a calculator, you can calculate that out exactly and go to 2 decimal places, and you'll have the length right here. Okay? The other way is similar. It's the distance formula. And it's similar because you use the square root and you have to square the 2 things and add them together. But using the distance formula, you have to use the coordinates. So we're using the xy coordinates of the 2 points that we have for our segment. So if I look, my end point here, let's use a different color. Okay. This is my segment, the one in orange. Okay? And the coordinate of my first endpoint is over 1, up 1. So it's 1, 1. And the coordinate of my second endpoint is over 5, or over 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Over 6 and up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Up 5. So that's where I came up with the endpoints of my segments are 1, 1 and 6, 5. Okay, now the first point I have, I just call that x1 and y1, because your first number is the x value and your second number is the y value. For the second point, I'll call it x2 and y2. Okay, then we're going to simply plug in everything into our formula. So I'm going to have large radical symbol, and I'm going to start with parentheses because there's a parenthesis right there, and it says to take x2. Well, my x2 is 6, so I'm going to plug in a 6, subtract my x1, which is 1, and that has to be squared, plus, then it says y2, so my y2 is 5, and I have to subtract my y1, which is 1, squared. Alright, so 6 subtract 1. You have to do what's inside the parentheses first. We have 5, so we have 5 squared, plus 5 subtract 1 is 4, so we have 4 squared. Kind of looks familiar. I think I had the exact same thing up here for the Pythagorean theorem. And I'd have to take the square root of that. So I have the square root of, let's figure out what these numbers are squared. This is 25, and this is 16. Okay? And so my answer is going to be equal to the square root of 41. Again, when you have a calculator, you can give me an approximation, actually, is what it would be. It's going to be 6 point something. And I'd have you go out to 2 decimal places, most likely. Okay, the next thing that we are going to cover is slope. Finding slope, calculating slope. Again, there are 2 ways you can do this. The first way is just simply counting, okay? So the rise of the segment over the run of the segment is what slope is. So it means you can count how many squares up or down. That'll give you the rise to get from one point to the next. Okay, so here's my point. Here's my other point. So I need to count how many to get up to my second point. So how many up? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's double check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 up. Okay, so my slope is going to be, it's rise over run. And I just found that my rise is 6, because that's how many up to get to your second point. Then you figure out the run, and that's how many over. How many do you have to go over to get to your other point? And this one's pretty easy to see. There's 1, 2, 3 squares. So it's 6 over 3. But that fraction can be reduced. So if I reduce that, I know 3 goes into 6 2 times. So I'm basically dividing each of these by 3. And I would get 2 over 1. Or we can just write that as 2. Okay? The other way of doing it is to use the slope formula, which is your y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay? And I've already written down what the endpoints of the segment are for you. The first one is over 1 and down 1, 2. Ooh, I messed up. This is negative 2, actually. Okay? And the next one is over 4. 1, 2, 3, oh, I guess right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and up. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this one's 4, 4. Okay? So I've got 1, negative 2, and 4, 4. And then we plug them into the formula. Okay? So again, we're going to label these as x1 and y1 and x2 and y2. So this is my x1, this is my y1, this is my x2, and this is my y2. Okay? So let's plug them in. y2 is 4. So into my formula, y2, I'd have 4. Subtract, my y1 is negative 2. And down on the bottom, I have x2, which is 4. Subtract my x1, which is 1. So I end up, now when we have subtract a negative here, we end up with adding, so it's 6 over 4 minus 1 is 3, which is equal to 2. Okay, there's slope. Now, last concept we need to talk about is midpoint. Midpoint is the middle of a segment, the point where the segment's divided into 2 equal parts. To find the midpoint, you can use the midpoint formula, which is this. x1 plus x2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Okay? There are parentheses at each end, and it's separated by a comma, which means that your solution, your answer, is going to be an ordered pair. Like possibly 2, 5 would be an example. So let's go through and figure out what my endpoints are in order to plug in my x1 and x2, y1, y2. Okay? So if I go, find the endpoint here, I go over 1, 2, and up 1, 2, 3, 4. So my first point is 2, 4. And my second point is over, if I look, that says 10. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's 1 before the 10. So it's 9, comma, and it's only up 1, 9, 1. So let's label this as x1, y1. And this is x2, y2. Okay, and now I'm going to plug them into my formula, which is basically two problems separated by a comma. So on the first one, I have x1 plus x2. It's a formula. So I'm going to take 2 plus 9 divided by 2. And for my other one, it's y1 and y2 added together. So 4 plus 1 divided by 2. Okay? So 2 plus 9 is 11 divided by 2, comma, 5 divided by 2. Okay? So if I want to do that with decimals, it would be half of 11 is 5 and a half, comma, and half of 5 is 2.5. So let's check it. Let's plot this point and see if it looks like we're in the midpoint. So I need to go over 5 and a half. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and a half, and then up 1, 2 and a half. It does look like that would be my midpoint. Yeah, exactly. Okay, now for the rest of your notes, I want you guys to make a summary. Put in your own words what we just went over. Then for the questions, I want you to write down 2 questions that pertain to the notes. 2 questions that you have or that you would like to see answered based on the notes. Okay? That's what you need to do for the rest of your homework. And I will see you tomorrow.